Madam Acting Deputy President, what a nasty, vicious and completely untruthful address that was by the previous speaker. A diatribe against the minister who has done more to save lives and to get in order our immigration system than any minister in recent history. And Senator Hanson-Young cannot stand that. She cannot stand the fact that she has been proved to be wrong, that Mr Morrison saves lives and brings some order into the immigration system that brings in those who have been waiting in refugee camps for years. Now, Mr Deputy President, I'm a bit confused by this debate, I've got to say. I've heard Senator Singh and Senator Hanson-Young. I'm not quite sure what they are complaining about. Now, Senator Hanson-Young untruthfully said the Australian government had done nothing. Well, I mean, it's a matter of fact that already $18 million has been provided in direct assistance, and at the Estimates Committee we were told that Australia punches well above its weight when it comes to humanitarian aid. Now, if it's the money that Senator Hanson-Young and Senator Singh are talking about, and if they want Australia to provide more money, they should actually talk about that and say where it comes from. Mr Deputy President, I say to Senator Hanson-Young, how would it be if we were able to give $33 million a day to fight Ebola? She'd probably say, oh, that'd be good. Well, Mr Deputy President, if Senator Hanson-Young hadn't supported the previous government that ran up a debt that will approach $600 billion and which costs Australia $33 million a day in interest, if Senator Hanson-Young hadn't been part of that, we could be using that $33 million every day to go to aid around the world, to go to the Ebola crisis. But do we hear that from Senator Hanson-Young? Of course not. Mr Deputy President, Senator Hanson-Young's diatribe was just, well, it wasn't full of untruths. There wasn't an accurate thing she said.
Order.
She wasn't. Well, I think it's.
Order.
I think it's quite. I think it's quite interesting that when Senator Hanson-Young's misrepresentation, the misinformation she's provided to the Senate is completely wrong. All she does is sit there and giggle. And it simply proves that Senator Hanson-Young doesn't give one iota of a concern about the plight of people who are in these situations around the world. If she did, she'd support Mr Morrison's attempt to bring in people to this country who are waiting their turn in the squalid camps around the world. But there we are. Senator Hanson-Young, if you want to give $33 million a day to fight Ebola, you could have done that if you hadn't have supported the previous government in running up a debt that now costs us $33 million a day in interest. Now, Mr Deputy President, I asked Senator Hanson-Young or Senator Singh, as I asked Senator Di Natale in Estimates, what is stopping any of them from volunteering their services today to go to these places in Western Africa? And as we were told at Estimates, there is not one thing stopping Senator Di Natale using his expertise as a medical practitioner to slip over there and help. Not one thing. And I might say Senator John Herron in this chamber actually did just that when he went to South Africa, to Rwanda and Rwanda, to use his medical skills to help there. Now, there is nothing that the Australian government is doing that stops any person in Australia from going and doing that. Senator Hanson-Young tells us there are dozens, hundreds of people waiting to go. Well, if they want to go, good luck to them. They go with my best wishes and my great admiration. We should be encouraging those people. But the Australian government has an obligation, a duty of care, to anyone it might send. And the duty of care is to make sure that those people are safe, those Australians are safe when they are there, and that they come back into the country as well safe. I mean, we've heard some politicians around this area, up in Cairns, I understand, getting on the soapbox and berating the Australian government for letting anybody back into the country who happens to have ever been over there. Well, nobody takes any notice of that particular politician anyhow, but he was reflecting a view of many people that we have to be very careful that the disease does not come into Australia. Now, all of the evidence we've heard at Evidence Committee, all of the things we've read in the paper, all of the announcements by the Prime Minister, the Health Minister, the Foreign Affairs Minister and the Immigration Minister point to the fact that we want to be very careful for Australian citizens that we don't have the Ebola crisis here. I also raised the point at estimates, and it's something I've raised often. There are other countries who have a closer association with Africa than Australia does. And Australia has now, fortunately, directed its aid and its humanitarian aid to the Pacific and Southeast Asia, which I think is appropriate. And we are keeping money in reserves to address any possible outbreak of Ebola in the areas close to Australia for which we have a special responsibility. Senator Hanson-Young made a lot out of the UK and the US and Sierra Leone asking Australia to help. Well, as it was pointed out in estimates, and Senator Hanson-Young had bothered to go along and listen, those were form letters that went out to everyone. It wasn't a particular request to Australia, as Senator Hanson-Young and the Greens would have you believe. So, Mr Acting Deputy President, Australia is punching well above its weight in this. If there are Australians who want to go, they are quite free to go, and when they come back, they'll go through the normal processes. But the Australian government will not direct people there until it can satisfy its duty of care to people who expect it to look after themselves.
Senator Lyons.